This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here's the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this edition of A Different Perspective. I am, in fact, Kevin Randle. Before I bring my guest on, Clas Svahn, I want to talk about something that happened the last week. I do what's called a video lap, and I'm sure many of you do that, where you're sitting in front of the TV and you keep pushing the channel button to cycle through the various channels. And I came across the end of an Expedition X or an Expedition Unknown. It's Josh Gates' program. They were talking about the Socorro UFO crash, and they concluded happily and pretty professionally, they thought, that it was a lunar lander suspended from a helicopter, which of course makes no sense because Lonnie Zamora would have seen the helicopter. But we have landing impressions, and I was thinking, do they compare the landing impressions found on the site with the lunar lander or the LEM or whatever the object was? And I have a complete Project Blue Book file, and the dimensions of the landing traces in Socorro were there. And I thought, well, I'll compare them to the lander, and they don't match at all. So that kind of eliminates it there. And I'm thinking also that Lonnie Zamora would have mentioned a helicopter had there been one. We don't have silent helicopters. There were other problems with this. But as I was doing the research, I came across something else that kind of made my blood boil. And that was the idea. Somebody was talking about UFO sightings and mentioned Roswell and said it was explained by Project Mogul. I'm thinking, don't these people pay attention? I have spent literally years telling everyone that the Project Mogul answer doesn't work simply because the balloons weren't launched on June 4th to leave the debris in the field that found by Mac Brazel. That flight was canceled. It was clearly canceled. To make the winds aloft data work, Charles Moore, who figured this all, calculated this, I guess is the word I was searching for, calculated that the launch had to take place sometime between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning. At 6 o'clock in the morning, in the field notes, it says the flight was canceled. If it was canceled at 6 o'clock in the morning, how could you launch it 3 or 4 hours earlier? Simply makes no sense. The other thing I'll point out is Mac Brazel, according to everybody who knew him, including his son, would be in that particular field at least every other day because that was where one of the watering stations was for the livestock. So he had to check it and drive them into that area every day. Had the balloon fallen, and it would have fallen on June 4th, 1947, he would have found the debris much, much earlier, and we wouldn't have the conflict over the date in late or early July. So it eliminates all that. And what gets to me is presenting these explanations for mysterious cases. They just can't say, well, it's mysterious. We don't have an answer. Could be extraterrestrial, could be something else. We just really don't know. We don't have a solid terrestrial answer. And yet we still get this idea from the various media sources that I take a look at. I look at a wide variety of them in process of doing this program and other things that don't seem to do any kind of in-depth research, which is kind of annoying. If you're going to make a pronouncement, at least be sure you get your facts right. That's kind of what bugs me. So I thought I would do that intense monologue before I brought on my guest, Clas Svahn, who is a chairman of the Archives for Unexplained, AFU in Sweden. The AFU was founded in 1973 and today spans over 6,500 square feet. I think it's now bigger than that, and 4,000 yards of shelf capacity. It's a lot of information about UFOs. He's been a professional journalist since 1978 and employed with Sweden's largest newspaper, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. He can pronounce it when he comes on if he so desires. And since 1990, he is an international director of the UFO-Sweden and has been investigating reports of alleged UFOs since 1974. He is also the author of nearly 30 books and a frequent expert on Swedish radio and TV and lecture. He is living outside Stockholm with his wife, Anneli, and 2 grown-up sons. Clas, welcome to A Different Perspective.
Thank you, Kevin. Dagens Nyheter is my newspaper.
What was that again?
It's daily news in English. Dagens Nyheter.
Okay, and I gave the dimensions of the AFU, and I think that's now outdated, isn't it? Isn't it a larger area?
Yeah, it's another locality as well now, so it's a little larger. And we are trying to find a locality for everything now. We have 16 different localities at this moment. We want everything under one roof, and we have been looking for that for a couple of weeks now, visiting 4 different places in Norrköping where the archives are situated.
What exactly do the archives contain? I mean, is it just UFO stuff or paranormal stuff or a wide variety of stuff?
It's really anything about the unknown. Most are about UFOs. Lots about the paranormal, but also quite a lot about astronomical questions and enigmas. Lots of things from way back, the 1800s, from, you can say, the occult. And, well, just name it. I think we have it.
Well, you just did a book, didn't you, that came out that kind of covers that sort of phenomenon.
Yeah, that's right.
And the name of the book is...
It's Files of the Unexplained, and it's really about what's in our archives. And we also have a download page which is free for everyone. AFU downloads. You can get magazines and documents for free, hundreds of thousands of pages. So please visit and use that information.
Do you work with John Greenwald at all?
We have contact. We are not working together. I wish we could, but he has a huge enterprise as well. So I'm really, really fond of his work. He's a great guy.
And a lot of his material is also online for free as well, which I think is a great thing to do, share all that information, which kind of relates to what I was talking about earlier when I was able to go online and gather some of the information about the Socorro landing. As I said, I have a copy of the Project Blue Book file, but you can go online and get the Project Blue Book files as well, so you can check that stuff out yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of...
Sharing is very important.
Yes. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about mainly today is we're very American-centric, and I think it has to do with the way the United States is situated between 2 large oceans, and we don't have a lot of contact with our European colleagues or our African colleagues or our Asian colleagues. And so I was wondering how the abduction phenomenon, for example, is presented in Sweden. Does it correspond to what we see here in the United States, or is it significantly different in some way?
Yeah, that is a good question, because if you compare the US with Sweden and even with the Scandinavian countries overall, we have very, very few abduction cases compared to you. We have lots of contactees, people who stay in contact with entities, but abductions are very, very scarce. I know about 128 contactees. Some of them claims to have been abducted as well, of course, but I followed a few cases during the years, and I can share one of the cases with you if you are interested, because it's very, very strange.
Well, before we do that, let's kind of explain the definitions we're using here. Contactee is a person who claims to be in contact with the benevolent space brethren or the alien races, and an abductee is someone who may not feel the experience was benign. It was more of a taking you out of your environment and subjecting you to medical procedure type thing.
Yeah, they didn't ask for it to make it easy. It just happened. And as I said, very few Swedes claim to have been abducted. We have been following a couple of those during the years, because an abductee may experience other instances of abductions or strange contacts or dreams, or you know what I'm talking about. So One of them I followed for many, many years. He passed away just a couple of years back now. It's Ante Jonsson. His contact was made on February the 3rd, 1984. And he was traveling on a road in the south of Sweden. It was in the middle of winter. And an hour after midnight, he saw beside the road a gray figure and a black craft quite near his car. So he drove very, very slowly to take a look at those. But he was quite near his home, so he went home to get his camera. And when he went back 20 minutes later or something like that, it was all gone, he thought. But then he turned his car around, and suddenly there was this huge craft hovering in front of him, and he put his brakes to the bottom, really, and he skidded off the road into the snow at the side of the road, and he got stuck there. And when he opened the door to take a look what happened, a creature came towards him and grabbed him and dragged him out of the car. And after that, his memories are quite scarce, but he says that another couple of entities grabbed him and dragged him away from the car. And this far, it's an ordinary story. Just
Well, let me interrupt you here because I'm going to have to take a quick break.
Yeah.
When we come back, I think we should get a description of the creature that he saw or abducted him, and did he get any photographs, which he supposedly had his camera, and we'll take a look at that. For those who are interested on the material I was talking about earlier, it's a coral landing and sort of that sort of thing. I put a posting on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com that covers all of this in detail, and it's got some of the illustrations of the landing traces and that sort of thing from the Project Blue Book files and what other people have said, so you can get a better perspective, a different perspective, if you will, on what that looked like and what was going on there. I will be back with Clas Svahn right after this, so please stick around. And we are back. When we went away, I'll ask you the question to be answered yes or no, which we're supposedly never to ask a yes or no question. Did he take photographs of the entities?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
But to remember them, when we left Ante, he was out on this wintry road, and
Yes.
he was dragged away from his car by 3 entities. He said they had arms and legs as us, but he never saw their faces. It was quite dark. It was in the middle of nowhere, really, and no street lights. But so far, it's an ordinary story in many respects. But what happens next, it's not ordinary at all, because at 1:50, the police in the nearby city of Växjö get a telephone call from a man who calls himself Bengt Johansson. And Bengt says that he sees a car standing at the side of the road with probably a man behind the wheel. And over the car, this craft, black craft, is hovering. So the police goes to this place, and they find Ante sitting in his car in complete shock, with his fingers bent around the steering wheel, and he's shaking violently. And around the car, they see traces, footprints from Ante Jonsson himself, probably, but not from anyone else. But at 2:30, the police takes Ante to hospital. And when I read his hospital records, his journal, the doctor writes that Ante is in complete shock. He's hyperventilating, his eyes are staring, and his fingers are still bent like claws, like this. So he asks Ante if he has been experiencing something scary, and Ante says, "Yes, I have," and falls asleep. And when he is leaving hospital a couple of days later, the police is taking him back to this place of the event. And he is telling them this story. He makes drawings, and they could never explain what happened, really. But all is in the police records, and nobody knows who this Bengt Johansson, who made a call from a telephone booth a couple of kilometers away, who this man was. We have tried to trace him, impossible. But he saw this craft hovering over Ante's car, which is very, very seldom you get a second witness to something as special like this.
But it sort of reminds me of the Hicks and Parker abduction from 1973, where there were a number of witnesses that saw the craft and some of the activity around Hicks and Parker at the time. And I found in the military records documentation from people the next day that said they witnessed the thing. So to have that kind of documentation is certainly an important factor, because most cases you just have witness testimony and nothing else. So you've got the witness testimony and you've got the telephone call to the police from someone else.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop with this, because a month later, Ante is experiencing very strange dreams. And one night he wakes up when somebody is touching his shoulder. So he's standing up and is walking out of his house. And there he sees a man completely dressed in black. And he followed this man to a meadow where the same craft he had experienced 1 month earlier is hovering. And suddenly he's levitating and is taking aboard this craft. And he can hear the words, "Don't be afraid," in Swedish. "Don't be afraid." And 15 seconds later, or something like that, he's finding himself walking in his garden again. And this craft is leaving, just vanishing over him. That is just the start of a series of experiences, meetings with those entities that goes on for years and years and years.
Was there any kind of indication of what they were looking for or what they were doing, or why they kept coming back to visit him?
That's even stranger, really, because at the very end, when I asked him a couple of years ago, what did all this lead to? He said that I am a happier person. So I asked him, was this done just for getting you happy? I don't know, he says. That's all I got from it, really. But he also got machines, different artifacts, stones, things like that. I have seen some of the stones, but the machines and the artifacts he never showed me, because he said, if I show you those, my contacts will stop, and I don't want that.
You said he died several years ago, or a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Were the machines found at that point?
Well, that's even stranger, because just a couple of months before he died, 2 persons visited him at the hospital he was staying at. The 2 people said that they were relatives to Ante, which they were not at all. And after that, many of his notebooks vanished. And when he passed away, nothing was left, and nothing could be found, except half a year later, suddenly his notebooks turns up at the police station in another city, far away from where Ante lived. And now they are back with his family, and I will see them later this year, probably.
You haven't seen him yet, then?
I saw many years ago some of them, but those are later ones. I haven't seen them, but I will. I met with his relatives this summer, so I will get a copy of them, or be able to copy them.
Was there any indication why they would keep coming back to him? Was for this sort of a linear study, I suppose?
Well, he said that every meeting took place near water, mostly near some smaller lakes and dams around where he lived. He got this feeling, some creeping sensation in his body, and he went there. And the craft came, and he walked onto the craft, and they traveled to a planet where he didn't really know where it was. And he was given those artifacts, and he asked a lot of questions, but got very few answers, he says.
He has no idea what planet he went to then?
He got a name. It's called Prio. I mean, it's just a name. He said to me, it could be near, it could be far away. It was just a name. Every contactee or have their own names of their planets. This is just one another.
Well, I'm fairly skeptical of abductions reports. I think most of us are, because they don't make logical sense for the most part. Hicks and Parker makes a little bit of sense, especially now that additional witnesses have turned up that sort of witnessed the abduction. It makes it a much stronger case than many of them. But there's people like you're talking about who have this repeated abduction experiences, and I don't understand how that transpires, and I don't understand why that would be. Was there any clue as to why he was selected?
No, I don't understand it either, but that goes for many things in ufology, really. He didn't understand why this was happening to him at all. I know that his family tells me that the Swedish security police visited him from now and then, many years after the experience on the Winterway. And when they came, the rest of the family had to leave. So what transpired between them, I don't know. And I don't know why the Swedish security police had an interest in him as well.
Well, let's talk about the creatures for just a moment. You said they had 2 arms, 2 legs. Did we get an idea of the height? Were they slender? Were they heavy? How were they dressed?
I should say a little bulky. A little, maybe 1 meter, 30 centimeters. I mean, not as long as Ante, because they were smaller. They were quite swift. They walked very fast. You couldn't hear them talk when they were dragging him out of the car. You don't remember that. When he met them later on, they were talking ordinary Swedish. I mean, Ante was talking in a quite. He was from Finland from the beginning, so he didn't talk exactly as I do, but they talk perfectly and Swedish as we do here in Stockholm.
So, did he give you a description of the interior of the craft or anything like that?
Yeah, it was quite small. The ones he was abducted into were very small. We didn't see much of it really. It was like a pod where he and maybe 1 or 2 other of the creatures were sitting. He never saw anything outside, and there was no windows. He was just transported to some place that were quite a lot like Earth. He was sitting on this seashore, and the stones he got from these visitations and brought with him, he had in his pockets when he came back to his house later on. I have one of those stones here now in my house, and I will get it transferred to the Natural Institute of Science here in Stockholm, and they will take a look at it and see if there's anything special with it.
It's probably going to just turn out to be a rock.
Yeah, for sure. I would say 100% sure.
Which is my greatest fear is we get a real honest to gosh piece of a flying saucer. I mean, it comes from an alien spacecraft and we take it out to be analyzed and they said, yeah, it's aluminum.
Yeah, it could be like that, I mean, the universe is made of the same stuff everywhere, so why not?
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll expand the discussion into other areas of Swedish ufology and that sort of thing. For those of you interested, like I say, I have my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. If you're interested in more information on the Sakharov case, I did a book called Encounter in the Desert, which lays it all out. And although one of the reviews said that there was nothing you couldn't find on the internet, I would say, yes, there is, because I interviewed people personally, and that stuff isn't on the internet unless it's been plagiarized. So there is unique material in there, some interesting insights to the whole Sakharov case. And of course, I just did a book, came out not too long ago, called Understanding Roswell, which is a compendium of a lot of the stuff, but goes into a deeper look at some of the people who were involved and tries to eliminate some of the bad stories that have been circulating about it and kind of clarify the whole thing, which is why I cleverly called it Understanding Roswell. We will be back in just a moment. We'll be discussing more Swedish UFO cases, so please stick around. And we are back. When we went away, I suggested we might take a look at some other Swedish UFO sightings. We have a wide variety of sightings here. How does the Swedish UFO phenomenon compare with what we see here in the United States? Do we have intercept type things with the military, landing trace cases, that sort of thing? What exactly does it look like in Sweden?
Well, most of the cases UFO-Sweden are investigating comes from ordinary citizens. And I interviewed the second in command for the Swedish Air Force a year ago, and he said that there have been no encounters with UFOs from Swedish airfighter pilots, whatever you make of that. But so the Swedish military is not that much interested in UFOs as you are in the US, which I think is quite strange because, of course, they have read about what's happening in the US as well. They should be more interested, I think. But most of the investigations are done by civil entities like UFO-Sweden.
Do you get many landing trace cases and that kind of thing?
No, not really. Very, very, very few. What we get and you don't get, I think, are cases where crafts or at least small type of flying things are crashing or landing into lakes. They still do that. I know we talked about the ghost rockets last time, and they were crashing into lakes. We are still getting reports here in Sweden of things going down into lakes and vanishing.
Well, the ghost rockets began in 1946, so it's a long-lived phenomenon in Sweden, which seems to be somewhat unique to Sweden. Is there any debris recovered from these things falling into the lake? Has there been investigations to try to recover material?
Well, UFO-Sweden has been on 2 expeditions, which I headed up to the very north of Sweden in 2012 and 2014, where a craft flew over the witnesses, turned 180 degrees, flying back, landing on the lake in front of them and sinking. We have been there. We have been looking with ground penetrating radar, trying to find this thing. And we have seen results from the radar that indicates that something is there. So we will go back there again, hopefully next year, with the new equipment that can see this thing in 3 dimensions. And then we can see if this really is the kind of ghost rocket thing that those 2 witnesses saw in 1980, in the summer of 1980.
Well, how deep is the lake?
It's very shallow. It's only 4 yards, but there is a layer of mud as deep as the water. So in the middle of that mud layer, you can see this thing resting.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Shag Harbor, which was, 1968 in Canada, where the thing fell into the water, but it eventually propelled itself away, according to Chris Stiles and Don Ledger, who I've talked to. But this thing is remaining there after all these years then.
We hope so. I mean, we cannot be sure exactly what is resting there, but something is it. And we have an expert on ground penetrating radar who says this could well be the ghost rocket. But we must go back, and it's a very difficult expedition because it's in the natural reserve and you cannot touch anything, and we got special permits to do this. But the authorities are very helpful, and I think we will be going there again, and with the help from the authorities as well.
Well, what did the witness say the thing looked like before it fell in the lake or landed on the lake?
Yeah, it was elongated, like a cigar with small wings, traveling just 100 yards over them. They could hear the sound from it, and they saw it coming flying from the south and over them, and they turned around, and this craft flew over the lake and then turned around 180 degrees, flying back towards them, and they were really scared because they thought this thing would hit them. I thought it was some Russian drone or something like that. I mean, it's 1980. It wasn't that many drones around, not many things looking like that. But it splashed really, and the water was splashing around it. And when it sank, they could see the bubbles of air coming up. So it was a physical object really, and they reported it to the military coming back to Stockholm. But the military never found anything.
Well, how long was it? How big?
Yeah, around 5 yards, something like that.
So about 15 feet.
Yeah, quite big.
Get a color or anything like that?
It was metallic. It was in broad daylight, so it was no color or anything else, but just like what you would think an aircraft or something like that.
Well, you've been on other expeditions or other searches for things that have fallen in Sweden in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been interviewing people around many lakes. I've seen things falling down, and of course, many ghost rocket witnesses. And just a couple of months ago, I went to the south of Sweden to meet with a gentleman who had seen a very small craft, maybe 2-3 meters long, flying over his rooftop of his house with a very high, strange sound coming from it, going over the lake, turning and diving into the lake without disturbing the water at all, just going down like it was nothing there at all, vanishing.
Well, this is very strange because I'm familiar with some of this stuff, especially from studying the ghost rockets a number of years ago. But it's an ongoing phenomenon, and it seems to be somewhat unique to Sweden.
It is strange. There were some reports from Norway in 1946 as well, some from Finland, some very, very, very few from Denmark. But the crashes were really focused around Sweden and some in Norway.
Well, I know during the ghost rocket phenomenon, the theory was that it might be something done by the Soviets to intimidate the Swedish government or the Scandinavian governments into some kind of relationship with the Soviet Union. But this, of course, has survived the Soviet Union. Did you look at any of the archives from the Soviet Union to see if there was anything to suggest that is a possible explanation?
Yeah, we have done that. And those things were flying far further than any rocket could fly at that point in time. They were flying at least 5 times as far as the German V bombs that were used to try to hit London in 1944, 1945. And the V bombs, those Hitler's weapon trying to hit London, they were transported from Nazi Germany in 1945, 1946 into the Soviet Union, and some were transported to the US. But they were not flying at that time. They were just testing them, and they did not have the same capabilities in the Soviet Union as the Nazi Germany had at that time.
So you found no link between the Soviet Union and the ghost rockets?
No, absolutely not. And some people have been speculating that there was a meteor shower, which is really preposterous because that must have been going on for weeks and months and years in the same spot of the Earth, which is impossible. So it was nothing astronomical and nothing from the Soviet Union. It's really a mystery. It's it's mystery that is very tangible. You could hear the sound, you could see the sun reflecting in the hull, you can hear the crash, you could see the water splashing up 20 meters in the air, but nothing was found. Sometimes indentations at the bottom of the seafloor could be seen. Stones were thrown up on the shore and water lilies were cut off, but there was no debris at all.
And you've looked at how many of these kinds of cases?
Maybe 60, 70, something like that.
And you would expect some debris to have been found at some point.
You know, in 1944, V-bomb crashed in the south of Sweden, and because it was misdirected. And they found 2,200 kilos, 2.2 ton of debris in the woods.
So we've got these things. Did any of them ever hit land, or did they always fall into water?
Yeah, never land, always water.
This is kind of a mystery in and of itself, isn't it?
I mean, someone was aiming for water, that's for sure. And they hit water all the time. Not a single one was ever seen crashing on land.
And pardon my lack of geographic knowledge, but is Sweden that covered with lakes?
No, not really. Most of it is land. And by chance, there should have been at least, the military investigated 100 crashes. Everyone in lakes. Should have been at least one on land.
And they recovered nothing that, as far as you know.
As far as I know, and I interviewed a lot of people who were part of those investigations. One of the principal investigators at the most important crash on July the 19th, 1946, at Lake Kölmjärv, which they covered for 2 weeks trying to find. I interviewed him in 1986, and he was puzzled. He said there was no doubt the crash had happened. There was no doubt that it was a real thing. and he couldn't understand why they couldn't see any debris from it.
So we have kind of a subset of UFO mysteries here. I mean, we can look at a lot of subs like crop circles and cattle mutilations, all these subsets, which are probably not all that well documented, but you have something here where the Swedish military was involved in attempts to recover it. We've got eyewitness testimony, and they just have failed to recover anything.
We have thousands of pages of investigations from the military just from 1946. I read every single paper, and they didn't know. They said it at the end in December 46 that there were 225 cases that were real objects out of 1,100 investigated reports.
Well, we're going to have to come back in just a moment here, and I think we'll see if there's other kinds of UFO sightings that you get in Sweden, somewhat similar to what we have in the United States, but it seems like you've got kind of a different phenomenon going on there for the most part as well, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. Your book is called, your latest book?
Files of the Unexplained, and it's about archives.
And it is in English, by the way, for those of you who would like to read it as well.
Yeah.
The blog is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. Your blog is www.afu.se or SE.
Yeah.
We will be back right after this, finishing up the program, so please stick around. And we are back, surprisingly back. Caught me a little bit off guard there. I'm joined by Clas Svahn. We're talking about UFOs in Sweden, as a matter of fact, and finding that their phenomena is a little bit different than ours. Are there been many photographic cases from Sweden? Have you looked at a lot of UFO photographs from Sweden?
I mean, since people got those mobile telephones, we got loads of pictures all the time. But if you compare them to the pictures from the 1950s, we got only specks of lights instead of nice picture crafts as we did in the 1950s or 60s. So no, not really, not many of interest. I should tell you about, we talked about the abduction scene from the beginning, if I may. There is a case I really want to share with you, because it's very strange. It's an interrupted abduction, you can call it. I investigated the case myself because a man who read one of my books called me, and I went down to him to meet him in the south of Sweden. And his wife was living there outside a smaller town. His wife wasn't told that I was coming there, so he was very annoyed. But after a couple of hours, we were sitting there in the sofa talking about this experience. And she told me that this night she had turned in. She always sleeps very well through the night. And when she wakes up, everything is undisturbed, and she just wakes as she started to sleep. But this night she woke up. It was light all over the bedroom, and she was facing down, looking down on the bed, just hovering maybe a couple of centimeters from inches over the bed. And she was like in a fetus position, and she was dragged with her back out of the bed. And she was, of course, very scared. So she saw her husband was sleeping there, because it was so light in the room she could see him. And she tried to talk to him, to yell to him, but she couldn't speak. So she grabbed his arm instead. And he tells me that he woke up. He sees his wife floating from the bed towards three entities, like those Whitley Strieber-like entities, with no hair, big black eyes, all that stuff that you can read in Whitley Strieber's books. And he tried to kick those entities. And when he kicks at them, they vanishes. And the room is completely black again. And he can hear his wife hitting the floor, because she's at that point hovering outside the bed and falling down. And if that sounds very strange to you, the next thing that happens is even more strange, because she goes up into the bed again, says to her husband, "What peep was that?" And he says, "I don't know." And they fall asleep.
They fall asleep.
Yeah,
I think I'd have been up for the rest of the night.
Yeah, they tell me afterwards that had this been anyone standing in the bedroom, they would never and gotten back to sleep again. They would have gone around all the house looking for that person. But they reacted quite the opposite, and they didn't understand why. And I followed them for many, many years, talking to them. And nothing ever happened to them again. This was their only encounter. But it was so strange to them how they reacted. They don't understand that. They talked about this when they woke up the next morning, and they compared notes, and they had experienced exactly the same thing.
Yeah, that's a strange one. I don't remember hearing anything like that at all. We get the abduction cases in which the spouse or the partner is asleep in the bed and sleeps through the whole abduction and has no knowledge of it. And here's one where we've actually got both of them reacting to the entities. Did they get a look at the entities? Do you have any idea what they looked like? Or
very, very thin arms, very thin legs, and the arms were really like spider thin arms. The bodies were again like with the Strieber's the painting on the book cover, Communion, and the eyes were those black slanted eyes you can see there, and the nostrils very, very small. So of course it was really, really a copy of what you can read in his book, but the bodies didn't match really, not the arms and not the legs anyway.
Well, in Sweden, you say that the military doesn't have any encounters with the UFOs. What did you discuss with them the encounters the American military has had with UFOs? What were their reactions to that?
Yeah, I asked this second in command for the Swedish Air Force about that, and he knew about it, of course. He was interested, but he had no first-hand knowledge. But he promised me to look into it. Of course, there have been encounters before year 2000, I should say. What I asked him about was encounters after 2000, because that that made me curious. But way back, we have several encounters which Swedish fighter pilots have seen and sometimes chased unknown objects over Swedish airspace. Yes.
Did they ever fire on them?
No, not to my knowledge. There are said to be gun camera pictures. I have a witness who saw the gun camera pictures together with an entity of military personnel from two Swedish fighters following objects that looked like cigars, but they never fired anything on them.
And the gun camera films have never surfaced?
No. And I asked around for them, and nobody knows about them. The person I interviewed is a very, very reliable pilot, but he's the only witness to it, as far as I know.
We have a little bit of the same situation here in the United States where there's rumors of gun camera films, but they're somehow we never have been able to find them.
Mm.
Do you have anything like FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act in Sweden?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've used that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite the same as in the US. It works very, very well. And we have been able to secure thousands and thousands of pages that have been classified. And in those documents, we have found lots of interesting observations made by the military, but no smoking gun really, only good observations and radar returns, of course, mostly from the 1950s and 60s, but also from the 1970s. And at one point in maybe it was around year 2000, there was a radar return of an object that two men did see and took a picture of with their mobile telephone. And I went to the military and I could see this radar return myself. I could see this object traveling around the house where those men were living. So that was a real object, and nobody knows really what it was.
Well, that's an interesting case because you have a eyewitness testimony, you have radar tracks, and you have a photograph.
Yeah.
So you've got three different chains of evidence there.
And I saw the raw data myself as well.
Yeah, well, that's a fascinating case. What do you people in Sweden make of the UFO, the U.S. UFO situation? Do you get a feeling that they're active in watching it, or not really caring?
Yeah, there are a great interest in Sweden for what's happening in the US, I should say. When I am out giving lectures, which I quite often do, I always talk about the UFO scene in the US. And I interviewed Ryan Graves, one of the fighter pilots, and I talked about him as well and what he told me. I also made interviews with lots of other people in the US that have first-hand knowledge on this. So it's a great interest. I'm often interviewed in radio and TV and newspapers about this. So for sure, we are following what's happening in the US.
Is there a case that particularly leaps out as very interesting from your perspective that happened in the United States? Or, I mean, what cases would you be looking at?
Well, the one case I think is very interesting is, of course, when I talked to Ryan Graves, because he told me that they met those crafts every day for more than a year, and which is very strange, of course. They were there, they were flying out over the Atlantic on those training missions with the F-18s, and when they came out in this training area, the objects were waiting for them. They were there. And when they left, the objects were still there, flying around. So they were there for hours and hours and hours. They could stay up there for many, many more hours than those F-18s could. That's strange. And of course, the USS Nimitz case is one of the most interesting cases.
Well, I think we're out of time here. Need to thank you for taking some of your time late there in Sweden to chat with us today. The website is www.afu.se for, I guess, Sweden.
Yep.
You can take a look at what's going on there, and you're gathering a lot of documentation from around the world for a larger archive type thing. A lot of information like that. Any last words for the audience here?
I think you should take a look at AFU website and use that. And if you want, please help us, because we are funded by ourselves. So we can do even better work for you and help you in your research. That's what we are there for.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. Next week with luck, we'll be talking to Kurt Collins about his Flying Saucers That Time Forgot. I'll look at some of the interesting stuff that went on in the 40s and 50s and 60s about the UFO phenomenon. For those of you who are interested, as I say, the latest book is Understanding Roswell. I have a couple of other books in the pipeline that will be out in the next year or so, dealing with Roswell, with the 1973 wave of UFO sightings in the United States, and an updated version of the Roswell Encyclopedia, which I think is an important book to take a look at. If you get a chance, take a look at both UFOs and the deep state, because I think it's appropriate for understanding UFO research in the United States today and how it can be hidden from the general public. And take a look at Encounter in the Desert, which has to do with the Socorro sighting, and that is what I talked about earlier. And finally, of course, the Leveland case, which I think is a very important case, and it just doesn't get enough interest or research to it, because I think this is another case that kind of has gotten lost in the all the other material being published and talked about. But it's one that's multiple witnesses with interaction with the environment and multiple chains of evidence. And I think it's something that needs to be examined. As I say, I'll be back next week with Kurt Collins in about 167 hours. So thank you for tuning in.